The complainant alleges that the incident occurred on July 26 when the officer initiated a contact with a minor, male African-American teen in the Hilltop. The complainant alleges that the officer, while in his cruiser, harassed her minor teen son while he was walking home from the corner store. The BWC...
Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about a very serious topic. The topic we're going to be discussing to a large degree today is going to be bias-based policing. Now, I'm having a hard time containing my laughter while I'm talking about a very serious allegation against a police officer. The reason that I find this to be so hilarious is because the absolute amount of incompetence on display at the Office of the Inspector General and the Civilian Review Board of the Columbus Division of Police. This is the kind of shit that you just can't make up. If you heard the introduction, it says, this was a complaint that was filed after a Columbus police officer followed this woman's African American son home and harassed him for no reason. They literally said that. And what they're going to go on and do is say, you know what? This is a case of bias-based policing. This police officer harassed this poor African-American male who was wearing a hoodie for no reason other than his race and his hoodie. But the problem is, it was not an African-American male. It was a white kid that this officer was talking to. I know this officer. I found out who it was through a variety of sources. I got a hold of him today, and he told me that's the funny part is it's a white kid, and he doesn't know how they got confused about this. He even told me the kid's first and last name. I was able to look him up in mugshots. Now, I can't show you guys a juvenile mugshot. They won't release that. But what I did is I found a picture on the internet that is a very similar description to the kid that I saw in that picture. So I'm going to show it to you. And then you can tell me that if a police officer tries to talk to this kid and ask him for his identification, if this is a case of bias-based policing. So here you go. This is pretty much what the kid looked like. So a Columbus police officer, I might have to take this off my screen because I don't know if I can do this and keep a straight face. A Columbus police officer was out on patrol one day. It was July 26, 2023 in the early afternoon. So the hottest hours of the day. He observes a young man walking up the sidewalk wearing a big thick hoodie with his hood pulled up. It's like 85, 90 degrees with a heat index near 100 degrees. The officer says, you know what? People typically don't wear hoodies with the hood pulled up in the summertime like this. Usually people walk around with their shirts off. This is kind of odd to me. So he rolls up next to this kid. He's in the street. The kid's on the sidewalk, and they're both moving, let's call it northbound. I don't know which way they were going, but I do know for a fact that they continue to move, and you're going to hear that on the Civilian Review Board's recount of the incident when they talk about it. So he looks over at the kid. He goes, hey, man, do I know you? You look familiar. And the kid's like, no, man, you don't know me. He's like, I don't know. He's like, you look really familiar to me. I'd like to know your name. And the kid's like, you're not getting my name, copper. And he continues to go forward. Well, eventually, kid gets to his home, and he gets up on his front porch, turns his camera around, and turns it on. He's like, this police officer is harassing me for no reason. I didn't do nothing wrong. I'm a good kid with no crimes. And then walks into the house. The police officer then leaves. So you have a situation where a police officer tried to talk to somebody. The person did not want to talk to the police officer, and they both continued on. This is a situation where a police officer was having a casual conversation that was completely consensual with a citizen, and did not stop and detain that person, didn't arrest the person, didn't search the person, did not violate that person's rights at any point. He was just trying to figure out who this person is because he looked kind of familiar to him. The kid was within his rights to refuse to talk to the officer. The officer was within his authority to drive down the street while talking to a citizen that was walking down the street. The officer pulls around the corner, goes on the city's mugshot system, and types in a description of the person that he was just talking to. Lo and behold, a mugshot pulls up. He looks at the name on the mugshot, and then he looks at the address where this child lives, realizes, you know what? This kid just walked into the house that is listed as his address on his mugshot. So he puts the picture, he says, that does look just like the kid I just spoke to. And this is the address where that kid lives. So now I have identified that kid. He then flips his cruiser around and drives by the house one more time, finds that kid out on the porch again. He goes up, as he's driving by, he kind of stops for a minute. He goes, "Hey, Logan, don't worry. I figured out who you are." And then he continues to drive on. After that encounter is when Logan's mommy calls in and says, "Cops are out here harassing my kid for no reason. They didn't have no reason to stop him, blah, blah, blah." Now, the officer said, "I think I recognize you from somewhere." And then he was able to find the kid in the mugshot database. So there's a good chance that he actually kind of did have an idea of who that kid was, and he did recognize him from somewhere. And when you have somebody who, when it's very hot outside, is wearing a hoodie with the hood up, that's an indicator that they might be up to committing crimes, because people do that kind of stuff to conceal their identity. And then the fact that he kind of looked familiar and the kid is in fact a criminal with a criminal record, this leads me to believe that the officer's suspicions were probably correct, and he had a valid reason for trying to talk to this kid. But as you will see, when the Civilian Review Board talks about it, they're going to say that he had absolutely no reason to talk to this kid. The only reason that the only suspicion he had for trying to talk to him was the hoodie, that is the only thing it is that's what drew his attention to the kid. The review board is going to make a lot of very silly mistakes when they talk about this case. One of the things that they're going to say, and I took some notes, although I don't know. Yeah, there you go. So one of the things that they're going to say over and over and over again is that the officer did not have a reason to stop the kid. Well, he didn't stop the kid. He let the kid continue to walk, and he continued to talk to this kid. He didn't stop him, detain him, impede his movement in any way, shape, or form. Didn't search him. Didn't do anything. He did not violate this person's rights. The investigator with the Office of Inspector General said that the officer did not treat him with impartiality. Therefore, they deemed this harassment. The funny thing about harassment is it's pretty fair to say that to a certain degree, harassment is one of the ways that police officers catch criminals. You know, we find somebody doing a thing. We talk to them. They might want us to leave them alone, but we're going to continue to investigate. Whether we detain them or not is a whole separate issue. But I can see you, if you're laying out on the street, messing with the ignition of a car, and I roll up on you, say, "This is my car." You've got no reasonable suspicion to believe this isn't my car. I can stand around and I can run the license plate of that car. And if it comes back to, if you're a dude that's like 6 foot tall and it comes back to a woman that's 5 foot tall and 350 pounds, you know, I can continue to investigate that stuff, and I might develop some probable cause. I can actually put my hands on you. There's nothing wrong with an officer continuing to investigate a situation, even though he might not have reasonable suspicion. He might see something that just kind of catches his eye and go from there. That's actually how we develop probable cause, you know? What's the other thing that they said? So there's the harassment. The harassment part. Another really funny thing is that the Civilian Review Board is going to ask the Inspector General's office what the definition of harassment is. Because if the officer broke a policy that has to do with harassment, then it must be defined. And they could not find a definition of harassment anywhere. Even though they're saying that the officer broke the policy on harassment, there is no harassment policy. The only thing that they tried to say is that this is bias-based policing. The reason they're saying that is because, what is it called when you misrace somebody? If you misgender somebody, that's like dead naming, right? But if an officer is talking to a white kid, and then you change the fact pattern and you say he was talking to a black kid, and you look at this picture, would you think this was a white kid or a black kid? Would you think that this is bias-based profiling because an officer wanted to talk to this kid? No, absolutely not. This is absolutely ridiculous. It's insane that the Civilian Review Board And the Office of the Inspector General did this whole workup and weren't able to determine whether or not this kid was white or black. I mean, it's a very serious allegation. And I pulled up the Division of Police's policy on bias-based profiling, and it says that bias-based profiling is stopping, questioning, searching, detaining, or arresting, or the seizure of assets, or attempt to forfeit property based solely on a person's race, sexual or sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, disability, family or military status, or any other status that is protected by federal, state, or local ordinance. The officer said, you know what, it was a really hot day. The guy was wearing a hoodie on a really hot day. I thought that was odd, so I tried to talk to him. The review board is, for one, they're saying the kid was black when he was not black. It's a very important part of this fact pattern. And then they're going to continue to say that the only reason he stopped him is because he was wearing a hoodie, even though the officer never even stopped this person. Hopefully I was able to drive that point home for you, but I just want you to hear what actually happened, give you an accurate representation of what this person looked like, and then I want you to hear what the Civilian Review Board had to say about that. So I think that's about it for me today. Enjoy the rest of the video. I will talk to you guys later.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right, case number 2023-1071. On July 27th, 2023, the complainant filed with the Department of the Inspector General alleging misconduct by CPD. The complainant alleges that the incident occurred on July 26th when the officer initiated a contact with a minor, male African-American teen in the Hilltop. The complainant alleges that the officer, while in his cruiser, harassed her minor teen son while he was walking home from the corner store. The BWC footage from the officer is in the footage. He is seen continually trying to ascertain the teen's name and the teen declining to provide this officer with the information. The officer continues to suggest that the teen looks familiar and continues to ask him his name. The officer then says, "I've been doing this job longer than you've been alive, and I know what people look like when they're suspicious." The involved officer was interviewed by the DIG, and the officer stated that the teen's appearance appeared to be suspicious because he was wearing a hoodie. He felt the weather was hot, and the teen was looking over his shoulder at him in the cruiser. Also, the officer confirmed that the teen was not linked to any criminal activity that he was investigating in the area, and the teen was not engaged in any criminal activity. The officer tells the teen he is just doing his job, and the teen walks home. As the teen is walking home, the teen starts recording on his cell phone this encounter with the officer. Before the teen walks into his residence, the officer yells to the teen, "See you later, Logan," from his cruiser. The teen then accuses the officer of harassing him, and the officer tells the teen he was just being friendly. The DIG's investigation consisted of review of the focus officer's BWC, the cell footage from the teen, and a review of the directives. The DIG concluded that the officer did indeed harass the minor teen by bias-based profiling. Specifically, the officer failed to treat the victim impartially throughout the interaction. The officer admitted that the teen was not linked to any criminal activity that he was investigating. The teen was not engaged in any criminal activity. The officer stated the teen appeared to be suspicious because he was, one, wearing a hoodie, and he believed that the weather was too hot for this hoodie, and number two, the teen was looking over his shoulder. Therefore, it is recommended that the allegation against this officer be closed as sustained, as there is sufficient evidence that the officer was harassing this teen while walking home, and he failed to treat him impartially in violation of CPD directives. Additionally, the Columbus DIG finds the officer's actions and articulated reasons for initiating and interacting with the teen were bias profiling, this being in violation of CPD Directive 3.07, bias-based profiling. Therefore, it is recommended a finding of sustained as to the officer's actions being in violation of CPD directives. So, conclusion, two allegations. One is Officer S, based on allegation by the complainant that he was harassing her son. It is recommended that this be sustained. And then allegation, our review committee reviewed that particular allegation. We agree with that. And as to that particular allegation, we move that that allegation be accepted as sustained for case number 2023-1071. And then there's a subsequent allegation that was brought by the Department of the Inspector General as to Officer S. He failed to treat the victim impartially on July 26, 2023. Based on the way that he was treated, he was failed to be treated impartially. It is recommended that this allegation be sustained. Our review committee also agrees with this. So we move at this time to accept allegation number 2 of the DIG as to 2023-1071.
Okay, first calling on the initial motion on 2023-1071. Got a motion on the floor. Do I have a second? Any questions or discussion?
I just wondered what the... is there a... I'm sure there is. What's the CPD definition of harassment?
Oh, let's see here. Let's see if we have that. I do not have the directive that defines harassment. Inspector, do you happen to have that available?
I'm looking, let me
Okay.
see, I usually, say that again.
I'm looking on this thing too.
We'll look it up if that's okay, and we can provide that for you before the end.
I'm still looking here. I'm thinking hopefully.
So I've got a highlighted
You know what?
outstanding question on that first motion.
Scott has the policy pulled up because the policy we're looking at,
Great.
it talks about the work rules, so he can read the policy to you to let you know what we were
All right.
basing it on.
Yeah, the policy we were looking at just essentially says, was a person stopped or was a person singled out in any particular fashion by that person based on race, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, color, religion, ancestry, national origin, age, disability, family or military status, or any other status that's protected by federal, state, or local law or ordinance. And the entirety of the policy is 3.07, bias-based policing.
Wouldn't that fall under the second allegation?
Was that the one that you were, I'm sorry, you were
No,
referring
I'm not
to-
asking about bias-based policing. I'm asking about harassment.
So just following up, so what I would say is, when we get complaints based on what the complainant is describing, the actions that occurred. And so what we do is we look at the actions that the complainant is saying, and we look at those and make a determination as to what they're explaining is the allegation, and we find out whether or not the officer violated a policy and procedure. And so in this, the person is alleging that the actions that the officer take, they felt to be harassing, What we did is we looked at what the officer did, and the actions he took was, in our definition, it was bias policing, simply because he didn't have any grounds for his articulating as to why he followed the plaintiff, why he stopped them, and his continuously asking him questions. So I hope that answers your question. So what we did is I know that you're asking us to give you a definition of harassment, but what we're telling you is the sustaining of the policy violation that we use to state that the officer violated policy and procedure was based on a CPD directive.
And if I may add, we're looking in the Division Directives Manual from which that policy was taken. They do have a definition section in the back of that. However, the definition for harassment is not defined back here.
Yeah, I mean, that this is biased, seems really evident, at least in the description that he didn't have a foundation for pursuing this minor. I was just wondering what the definition of harassment was. Well, because we have two allegations, and I'm just wondering what is the distinction that we're drawing here?
Yeah, normally, there's certain places you would look for a definition, but if you can't find one, you just go with a basic dictionary definition. General use.
Yeah, in the legal profession, if you didn't have it defined in the code, in the section for definitions, you went to Black's Law Dictionary, you went to a dictionary. So in our committee looked at the entirety of the circumstances, and you have a teenager who is followed, and he's wearing a hoodie, and the only thing that the officer can articulate is that it was too hot for this hoodie, in his opinion.
Yeah.
There was no criminal activity afoot.
Right.
There was nothing that he could tell. But the worst thing was when he got home, when he got to his home, he called him Logan. I mean, it was total harassment. By any I think by any definition.
Yeah, my understanding too is
You know.
that they weren't sustaining that he was in violation or guilty of harassment. They were sustaining that it was in violation of a specific policy
Yeah.
based on his behavior.
I'm not hearing it at all. I'm hearing the bias. I'm not hearing a foundation for harassment. What I'd like to recommend is that there be an addition to CPD policy, because this sort of thing probably happens more than this case. And so if that is, the case that we have harassment, there ought to be a definition of.
I'm going to just speculate, and Ms. Ross will correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say that if they're engaged in harassment, they're probably in violation of some other policy already. Yeah, and, I'm not intimately familiar with the rulemaking process layers involved with doing that.
Absolutely.
I'm sure that's a collective bargain item.
Right.
So right now, we've got two separate motions on the floor because the IG added an allegation, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, initially, the youth's mother alleged harassment kind of as a broad general term, which the IG is sustaining, but also specifically finds that the officer's behavior was a result of bias policing.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we have a first and second, at least on the first, on the violation of policy on grounds of harassment. We also have a motion waiting for a second on the, thank you, second allegation. Any questions or discussion about the bias policing in the second allegation? Okay.